There's a kind of loss that doesn't come with a funeral, no ceremony, no closure, no one telling you it's okay to grieve. It's the loss of people who are still alive, people you're expected to love no matter what. If you've ever cut off your family or felt the slow pull toward doing it, you already know this decision doesn't come from anger. It comes from exhaustion, from reaching a point where staying hurts more than leaving, and realizing that loyalty without safety isn't love. Most people don't understand this, because from the outside, family estrangement looks cold. From the inside, it feels like choosing oxygen. Society teaches us something very early: family is forever. So when someone walks away, the story becomes simple. They must be ungrateful. They're dramatic. They'll regret it. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. Most people who cut off family don't do it impulsively. They do it after years of trying to make things work. They explain themselves. They compromise. They shrink. They forgive things they shouldn't have had to forgive. And when none of that changes the dynamic, distance becomes the only boundary that finally holds. One of the most overlooked traits in people who cut off family is how long they endure before leaving. They normalize dysfunction early. They learn to tolerate emotional inconsistency. They internalize blame. Many grow up believing, if I can just be better, quieter, easier, this will stop. So they stay. They adapt. They survive. Until survival turns into erosion. By the time they leave, they're not angry. They're depleted. Many estranged adults were never allowed to be children. They became the emotional container, the peacekeeper, the one who understood too much. They learned early that their feelings were inconvenient, but other people's emotions were urgent. So when adulthood arrives, they don't feel like a child leaving home. They feel like an employee finally resigning from a job they were never paid for. Distance becomes the only way to stop performing a role they were never meant to carry. People often ask, why not just set boundaries? But boundaries only work when they're respected. For many people who cut off family, boundaries were ignored, mocked, punished, or used against them. So the psyche does what it's designed to do. It escalates protection. When verbal boundaries fail, distance becomes the boundary, not as punishment, as preservation. Cutting off family does not erase love. It complicates it. There is grief for the parents you wished you had, the family that only existed in moments, the version of yourself that kept hoping. This grief is uniquely painful because there's no social permission to feel it. People expect relief, but relief and grief often coexist. Family is one of the first mirrors we ever have. When you lose it, you don't just lose people, you lose context. Who am I without this story? Without this role? Without this history being constantly reinforced? Rebuilding identity after estrangement is slow, lonely, and profoundly transformative. Many people describe this phase as the first time they finally meet themselves. Healing doesn't automatically lead to reunion. Sometimes healing brings clarity. It shows you that the dynamic hasn't changed. The cost is still too high. Peace only exists at a distance. For many people, peace becomes the evidence that the decision was necessary. Not because the love disappeared, but because self-respect finally arrived. Cutting off family is not a victory. It's a grief-laden boundary. It's choosing, I will not continue to be harmed just to prove I can endure. This decision is rarely made by people who don't care. It's made by people who cared for too long without safety in return. It does not mean you're heartless, you're unforgiving, you're incapable of love. It means you reached your limit, You listened to your nervous system, you chose survival over performance. Sometimes distance is not rejection. It's self-respect finally taking shape. If this story feels familiar to you, you don't need to justify yourself. Some losses don't come with permission, but they're still real. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop bleeding in places that never learned how to care. Even after the decision is made, even after the distance settles, there is often guilt. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that shows up randomly. At night, on birthdays, during holidays, when something good happens and you instinctively reach for people who are no longer there. This guilt isn't proof that you made the wrong choice. It's proof that you were conditioned to put yourself last. People who cut off family often carry a belief deep inside them. If I were stronger, I could have stayed. If I were better, this wouldn't have happened. But strength isn't measured by how much pain you can tolerate. Sometimes strength is recognizing that enduring harm doesn't make you noble. It just makes you disappear. There's often an argument that keeps replaying internally. One side says, they're still your family. The other says, but look at what it cost you. And these two voices can coexist for years. You can miss people and still know you can't go back. You can love people and still accept that proximity was unsafe. This contradiction doesn't mean you're confused. It means you're honest. Because human attachment isn't binary. It doesn't turn off just because logic steps in. Even when you stop thinking about your family every day, your body often remembers. Certain tones, certain phrases, certain dynamics. Your nervous system learned these patterns before you had language. So healing doesn't happen in a straight line. You may feel calm for months, then suddenly reactive in a moment that seems unrelated. This isn't regression. It's stored experience releasing itself slowly in pieces you can finally hold. Many people who cut off family don't talk about it openly, not because they're ashamed, but because explaining it feels like reopening something fragile. Every explanation risks minimization, debate, judgment, so silence becomes a form of self-protection. Not everyone deserves the full story, and not everyone would know what to do with it if they had it. There's a specific loneliness that comes with family estrangement. It's not about being alone. It's about being unanchored. You realize how much of the world assumes family as a fallback. When you don't have that, you learn to build meaning differently, slowly, deliberately, without guarantees.